Shabbat B'Shalach, the two ways of crossing the Red Seas. We often experience the providence of the Almighty to such an extent that we have the impression that seas are opening before us. During our life as disciple, there are cases when we are simply extracted from a certain situation, and those who are pursuing us are simply drawn in their own anger, while on our side we continue our path on dry ground. Meanwhile, the world with all its dangers stands on both sides of us, like hermetically sealed water walls in a terrifying spectacle, but without being able to reach us anymore. For a young believer, Egypt and Pharaoh are often their own incredulous or just religious families, as well as old friends and other acquaintances. These ones do everything they can to prevent you from going out into the wilderness in order to present your offerings to Yahuwah. That means the sacrifice of your own person. So in these cases, the Almighty separates us from them in a spectacular way, and hostility ceases, as if these Egyptian armies were thrown to the bottom of the sea. Then we can move forward and reach the other side, where a new life can finally begin for us. However, there is another story in the Bible implying water and sea. This is where our Master appears walking on the water, in the middle of a storm. This is a protection where, having reached a certain spiritual age, Elohim is asking us to take our part of responsibility in the fightings. We must contribute by our own human strength to overcome certain hardships. Here the sea is no longer separated on our sides, and we do not walk on a very stable path anymore. But by a bit more humble miracle, I would say, we must learn to walk on the waters ourselves. If you no longer belong to the world, this world must no longer be pushed aside so that you can go from one point to another. You must already be able to know how to mix with this world without falling back into it. You have to understand more and more what the word of the Lord Yahushua means when he says that you will not be removed from this world, but you will be preserved in it, as we can read in John chapter 17, verse 15. You must take responsibility to preserve your own spiritual life. On our path of disciple, the Almighty offers us His providence according to our degree of experience, of strength, of vision, and spiritual wisdom. As long as we are small, children, weak, or inexperienced, He intervenes more dramatically. This is how we sometimes can see drastic solutions appearing in our trials. But if later similar difficulties come up again, the Messiah calls us to reach out to Him and put our feet on the water. I am with you. You must be able to walk on the water. There is no need to open the waters before your face anymore. And let me remind you that story in Matthew chapter 12 verses 22 to 33. Immediately Yeshua made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of Him to the other side, while He dismissed the crowd. After He had dismissed them, He went up on a mountainside by Himself to pray. Later that night, He was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Yeshua went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw Him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Yeshua immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," He said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Yeshua. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Yeshua reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of Elohim." When we see a problem arising, we often stop on the shore and wait impatiently for the sea to open, and we are surprised to see no response from Yahuwah, as it has been before. Why does our life as believers stop after a while without anything happening? Well, the answer has just been given here. He has already taken you out of similar situations. Now it is your turn to play. You know the way, put your feet on the water and start. We are stagnating like the generation that came out of Egypt. This people was unable to move forward because it spoke against Yahuwah and Moses. At each new trial they had to face, although having witnessed countless spectacular miracles in the near past. They always received food and water, but became unbelieving once hunger and thirst arose again among the people. The consequence was that this generation was condemned to die in the desert without ever crossing the border of the promised land. This promise could only be fulfilled with the next generation. Such a large-scale liberation occurs when demons are cast out of you in sometimes very spectacular ways. But often people who have already born again continue to struggle with certain sins and temptations. Thus, there are many Christians who continue to seek and constantly yearn to submit to more exorcisms, instead of realizing that they should perhaps just stop hindering the spread of the rule of Ruach HaKodesh of the Holy Spirit within them. And this, for example, by letting the Spirit of the Messiah fulfill his promise of fulfilling his commandments in us. Because legalism, like the rejection of the law, are two extremes which prevent the Holy Spirit from continuing his sanctifying work in us by reviving the commandments of the Eternal in our hearts, so that sin and temptations are crushed in the bud, that is to say, directly at the level of thought, as Yeshua promised us all. The solution is therefore no longer to cast out more demons who are not even in us any longer. And most of the time, the solution is not the opening of the sea in two anymore, but rather the act of putting our feet on the water and starting to walk in obedience in the Spirit of the Messiah. In a word, renew our conscience, as Paul calls us to do in Romans. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and prove what Elohim's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12, verse 2. Because we have to know that the root of every miracle is no other than the restoration of a law, that is to say, of the will and the word of Elohim.